Alright everyone, this was one of the all-time great chapters of One Piece. This is one of those rare One Piece chapters that combines two of One Piece's greatest strengths into one, with phenomenal emotional storytelling in the first half, but also just insane hype at the conclusion of the chapter. There is so much to talk about with this chapter, and of course we all want to talk about Loki, but I want to start by just focusing on the scene with the giant kids, because I think that is going to go underrated due to being upstaged with the Loki dragon reveal, of course, at the end of the chapter. But the scene with the giant kids falling is truly an Oda special. And what I mean by that is that Oda is often able to come up with these sort of scenarios where he's able to very quickly impress us with characters who we really barely know, but he's able to make us feel for them really fast. And the key is Oda's talent for just concocting unique situations that allow for grand acts of displays of character. So to begin with, the entire scenario that he came up with of these children being sent marching off a cliff to their death, fully aware of their impending death, with them basically having their life and their regrets flashing before their eyes, that in itself is of course very sad. But the added component of the kids' march being unstoppable and inevitable, and most importantly, that it is impossible to even touch them without causing great pain and literally piercing your own body through with thorns, simply makes it that much darker. But that very specific situation sets us up for so many of these giant side characters to really show us who they are, to give us this beautiful display of love and morality, where all the children's loved ones ignore all of that, they come in and embrace all the children, even as they're stabbed and run through and blood is pouring out of them. And without a second thought, they fall with the children to their deaths, accompanying them to the other side, simply so that the kids do not have to feel alone as death approaches them. But first, you can become your favorite admiral with the first ever Logia hoodies, the Magma hoodie, the Ice hoodie, and the Light hoodie. And the best part is, for the official launch of the Logia line, this month, all hoodies are $80 off. And on top of that, if you buy two hoodies, you get the third one free. These are 100% cotton, multicolored jacquard hoodies made to order with patterns literally knitted directly into the fabric. And right over the heart, you have the embroidered devil fruit detail. All hoodies are made to order and will take some time to ship. So go get your hoodies right now while they're $80 off, and you can buy two, get one free before the deal runs out. Just hit the link in the description below. That is just really great writing, and I think one of the smartest things that Oda did to give us a glimpse into each of the children's characters is to actually model a lot of the children off of the past versions of the Straw Hats when they were kids and the sort of conflicts that they would run into. We've seen, of course, the parallels between Colin and Luffy. Colin as a child wanting to go off to sea to be a brave warrior and everything, and even wanting to pursue Shanks much like Luffy did. So that's a given, but then we also see this long-nosed little kid who, much like Usopp, is chastised for lying all the time. We see a kid who, much like Zoro, seems to be obsessed with swords. We see a child who, much like Sanji when he was a kid, doesn't seem to understand the importance of not wasting food. We see a little punk like Frankie, who actually did his homework because he is smart, but he doesn't want to seem like a good guy. He wants to act like a badass bad kid who didn't do his homework. And an excellent touch was Johanna, who, very much like a young Nami who had lost her mother, who rejected Bellemere as her mom and basically said that you're not my mom, we're not a real family, so too do we see Johanna rejecting the idea of Ange being her mom. But just like Child Nami, when this looming moment of potential death and fear comes around, where Nami reconciled with Bellemere and acknowledged her as a mother, so too do we see Johanna reconciling with Angie and calling out to her as essentially her mother. What Oda did with these giant kids is just such a cool callback to the stories and origins of all the Straw Hats when they were children. And the one thing we know with all the Straw Hats is that ultimately they were deprived, for the most part, of being able to grow up with parents who were there for them and who loved them and helped raise them from childhood to adulthood. I think it's really cool to see a glimpse of essentially a version of these Straw Hat children who actually get to keep their loved ones. Parental figures who love them so unconditionally that they will not leave them even as they both fall, parent and child, to their deaths. And on the flip side, I love what this scene does for the adult giants. I mean, freaking Oimo, this random giant from all the way back in Water 7. he's stepping in and doing this grand act of self-sacrifice. Ripley, of course, has been a phenomenal character from start to finish, but this moment just really seals her as one of the best arc side characters that we've gotten. And Roto, man, Roto, what a long way he has come. I thought his big moment of sort of redemption was last chapter when he helped out in the team attack against the MMA. But this moment, he just comes in for his brother who doesn't even like and respect him. And Roto, without hesitation, stabs himself full of holes embracing his brother and is ready to die with him just so that his brother doesn't feel alone. And I think that's the thing that's really powerful about this whole scene that Oda came up with, that it's not like all of these adult giants are sacrificing themselves to save the children. That in itself would be beautiful, honorable, noble, etc. But this is a step further, in that the giants cannot save the children. The kids are going to die no matter what. And yet the giants are still willing to kill themselves to sacrifice their own lives simply so that the children do not feel as sad when they die. That is just an insane display of love. That is what I mean by an Oda special. It's just such a larger-than-life, heartwarming act, and Oda is giving it to a set of complete side characters in the story. This really is one of Oda's greatest strengths as a writer, to make us as the reader be able to feel very strong emotions extremely fast for characters that we barely know, by coming up with these unique scenarios that put characters in positions where they can show us their moral worth in really grand and vivid ways. And I think this really is Oda's best use when it comes to side characters. I have personally vocally disliked in the past arcs like Wano, where there are a million side characters that are all being treated as though they're part of the spotlight, where they become sort of the main focus of the arc, even above our actual main characters, the Straw Hats. But Oda's trying to give this treatment to so many dozens and dozens of them that it all just becomes a massive blob. But here in Elbaf, the only side character of the arc that Oda is really giving main character focus to is Loki. This arc features a ton of minor side characters, as we saw in this chapter, but they don't really eat up the spotlight of the story. It's not like we've been forced to follow major storylines for all of them, because we don't need to. So far, we've gotten enough of these various side characters like Ripley and Roto that we get their personalities without forcing the narrative to revolve around them. And then finally, when Oda does write a scene like this one, where we're suddenly shown the full depth of their characters, it actually really hits. That's all we really need. I don't need 20 chapters of continuously cutting away from actually interesting storylines over to Oimo versus Fukurokuju. And that's really what I felt like some of the post-time skip One Piece arcs had started to feel like. Elbaf so far has been the perfect balance for Oda between focusing on the main characters, the Straw Hats, giving us one important new character from the island of Elbaf itself, Loki, and then beyond that giving us a set of minor but enjoyable side characters as a supporting cast, who we then can appreciate these rare moments of additional depth and storytelling that is given to them. In general, Elbaf has given me a ton of positivity and optimism heading into how Oda is going to handle all of the side characters in the final war. But of course, the real highlight of this chapter comes at the end. The big reveal that we've been waiting on. Loki's fruit. So to begin with, just the lead up to this, with the revelation that the giants, like literal giants, far big, like hundreds of times bigger than humans, even those giants are basically just tiny little dots on a small patch of Loki's back. And when we're first made to understand that, oh wait, these giants are looking this small on another creature, it's kind of mind-blowing to think about what is the scale of what they're actually riding on right now. And so then we get that little pre-framing that builds our anticipation to the grand reveal. Loki is a dragon. And not just any dragon, truly a world-ending dragon. For a long time, it felt like the Giants of Elbaf were maybe hyping up Loki too much, like if Loki gets out, he'll destroy the world, yada yada. Everybody's saying that if Loki gets out, he'll destroy the world, and it's like, okay, well, could he really destroy the world? It looks like it. This is insane. I don't even know if there's anything remotely comparable to this in One Piece. Like, yeah, we've had massive creatures before like Zunisha, but the difference is that Loki is already a top-tier fighter in One Piece who can now grow to the size of Zunisha. When we first saw Luffy grow giant size, we thought that was mind-blowing. Giant Luffy is like an ant compared to Loki. If you just go back from Loki's introduction, I've been slowly hyping up the character more and more, because initially I was like, it feels like this character could be Yonko level. And then gradually, the more we learned about him, I was like, he might actually even be stronger than Kaido with the way that characters are hyping him up. But then over the course of the flashback, when we got all that stuff with the old legends, and then we saw how strong Harold was, seemingly comparable to Pirate King level characters like Rox, Roger Whitebeard, etc. And then we saw that Loki somehow fought evenly with a version of Harold that had actually been amped even further in power and who'd been given immortality. At that point, I was just like, did Oda kind of lose track of how he'd been setting up character strength so far? Because even if Loki's really strong, can he really fight toe-to-toe with God's Knight Harold, a character who is now clearly is beyond the level of characters like Rox and Roger? But now that we've seen the full extent of Loki's abilities, I almost feel like it's the other way. I think it's insanely impressive that Harold was able to stand and hold his own against Loki for any period of time. That is a huge feat for Harold. I really don't even know what to say about Loki's strength at this point. We have really broken devil fruits that we've seen before, like obviously the Nika fruit can bend reality in certain ways, and Imu's fruit has a lot of properties and abilities that we haven't yet fully pieced out, but obviously being able to create armies and everything like that. But I would say in terms of just straight destructive combat power, Loki's fruit is head and shoulders far better than anything else we've seen in the story. He could genuinely eat Kaido in one bite, like Kaido's a little worm. And what's confusing to me here is how much of his elemental powers are his hammer versus how much is his dragon form's abilities. We saw that it seems like Ragnar is used to channel lightning. He used Ragnar when he struck the tree and when he defeated Harold. And then we saw it was used for ice again when he struck the giant Draugr. But now that Loki's flying around in his dragon form, he seems to still be using the powers of lightning and snow. But just on such a ridiculous scale, you can't even compare it to any other One Piece characters. Like, the lightning that he's pouring down around Elbaf is so huge that even when Enel was using Maxim to amplify his powers, I think Loki's lightning is still on an even greater scale than that. And the fact that he's bringing snow across all of Elbaf, changing the climate of the island, but doing it passively, not with some sort of attack or anything like that. He's just passively creating this effect. Even Aokiji doesn't do things like that. Look, I know that Shanks supposedly beat him. I have a very difficult time wrapping my mind around how that would be possible. There's two options here. One is that Shanks is just way stronger than pretty much any character in the story besides Joy Boy and Imu. And, you know, that is a possibility technically, because Shanks' haki was suggested by Dorian Brogy to be comparable to Joy Boy's. So either that's the case, or Shanks didn't actually defeat Loki, which is also a very solid possibility in One Piece, because one thing that we've seen over and over throughout the story, and that has happened even in this arc many times, is that what we are initially told about how a certain event played out is not actually the truth of what happened. That was the case, of course, with how we were initially told about the story about how Rox was defeated, when we found out in actuality it played out very differently. That was the case, of course, with how we were told that Loki murdered his father Harold in cold blood to steal a fruit, when in actuality we found out that that's not at all what happened. We're even getting that case yet again with the Gunko situation, where Brook seems to believe that Gunko is a patricidal princess, when in actuality, based on the flashbacks we've been getting of her, it seems that she's not actually some either father-killing daughter. So until it's actually confirmed that Shanks did in fact defeat Loki, and especially considering last we saw Shanks and Loki are friends based on the end of the Harold flashback, I'm just not even going to think about that. I'm just looking at what we've got so far of Loki, and this is just clearly, point blank, the strongest character in One Piece history, outside of presumably Joy Boy and Imu. Luffy has a lot of catching up to do is what it looks like, and maybe we'll see him show out this arc. Maybe now he can use Bajirang guns at will or something like that. That's the only thing I can think of that would put him on a similar scale to Loki. Luffy in theory is only limited by his imagination. And the other main thing to remember here, and what I've been talking about in many videos recently, is that Oda nerfed Loki in this arc for a reason. A lot of people don't seem to believe that, but this was a point that was belabored many times over, that Loki that we see right now is not at full health, and now you might understand why it makes sense that that is the case and why Oda hammered that in for us. Because as we can see now, if Loki is at full strength, at full health, it would basically be an unfair matchup for pretty much anyone except, I suppose, Imu himself. Oda likely, just to keep things reasonable, has to save Loki's full strength for the final war. I mean, we pretty much just saw him solo all of the absurdly huge MMAs in a single panel. And that seemed like it was going to be a problem that it would take the Straw Hats the better part of the arc to slowly deal with. And while I do want to see Luffy and Loki working as a duo, at the moment, for this moment, I'm enjoying Elbaf being the Loki show, at least for the next couple chapters, as we really see a glimpse of what he can do. And finally, we have a voice from the people, my top tier of patrons. So Rakshas said, with the show of love from the Giants and the reaction of Sommers, the showdown between him and Sanji seems to be coming very soon. How will Sanji hurt him? I think he will awaken Conqueror's Haki and we will discover that Conqueror's Haki is not an inborn ability. I think you need to have the mentality for it, something you can't train for, but you can awaken and maybe inherit it. After all, it is the strongest tier of the ability to manifest one willpower. Sanji, King of Love, ? I think that something that's not going to change is that Conqueror's Haki is innate. I think that that is actually an important component of Conqueror's Haki, because a lot depends on what an author seems to favor as their ideas for the series. And throughout the story, Oda has actually seemed to really like the idea that some characters, some people are just innately built different. But the catch here is that Oda also seems to frame it like a lot of characters may have this sort of deep, innate strength of spirit, but it will take the right series of circumstances for them to grow into the type of person where they can really bring out their full potential. So that's why we see different Conqueror's Haki users have their Conqueror's Haki come out at different points in their life. A lot of it comes down to the various challenges and hardships that you face along the way. So if Sanji has Conqueror's Haki, I do think that it is just in him from the start, and I think we've seen a lot of displays from Sanji of extreme strength of spirit in a lot of variety of contexts. So I would not be surprised if he just had it all along, but it just took the right situation for him to finally start using it in battle. At least that's what I think we're heading to. So overall, I really love this chapter. This is an easy 10 out of 10 for me, and one of the best chapters in Elbaf, and one of my favorite chapters of post-time skip in general. So definitely watch out for tomorrow's video, and with that, I will talk to you all later.